Welcome back, everybody, to another Danny Phantom review. Today we're talking about the big one, the episode, The Ultimate Enemy. Fan favorite episode here. It's also a two-parter, so it feels extremely significant. They also went super hard on this episode. It even had a video game tie-in, which we covered on our gameplay show, PS Tuesdays, so you can watch that if you're interested. Links in the prescription. They also had like a Burger King toy line and maybe some other stuff. This episode they really put all their money on, basically. It had a big marketing push and stuff like that. Unfortunately, it wasn't as successful as they hoped it would be, although it is a great episode. Financially speaking, it didn't pay off how they hoped and would kind of actually eventually lead to the show getting canceled, which is extremely unfortunate because it's a great episode. But yeah, not as successful as they wanted it to be. Yeah, let's get into the actual story of the episode and why it's so fondly remembered. This is probably the darkest episode in the entire series, and so the main plot revolves around an evil future version of Danny. So right away, any episode about a dark alternate future is going to be a good one. So darker themes and story, two-parter episode, video game tie-in, everything about this episode feels big and significant. So I think that's part of why it's remembered so fondly. But let's get into the actual plot of this episode. So we start off in the future. We see a future version of Valerie, which is really cool. She doesn't get a whole lot of screen time. We actually don't see her in the present time at all in this episode, which is a little strange. There's a lot of other stuff going on, so they probably just didn't have time for it. But a cool future design for Valerie, which I like. And she doesn't appear that often in this season, so it's nice that we get to see her in this one. Actually, almost all the characters come back in this episode and have something significant to do. But in the future, we meet these new characters, the Observers, who are these culty eyeball-looking ghosts who are basically just the Watchers from Marvel. They just kind of observe all the important things that are happening that relate to the Ghost Zone and keep tabs on everything, I guess. And then we meet another new character, Clockwork, voiced by David Carradine, who is really fun. And he has time travel powers, basically. He's almost this omniscient Time Lord character who keeps tracks of and manipulates the timeline. And the Watchers, the Observers, basically say, hey, look, Clockwork, in the future, Danny turns evil and destroys basically everything. So we need you to kill him before that happens. And he's like, don't worry, I have a plan. Then we pick up with Danny, who is in class. There's a presentation on the CAT test that's coming up, the career aptitude test, which Danny has to take, which Lancer's all like, this will decide your future, and we have all these great foreshadowing moments. It's actually a really well written scene that establishes the whole themes of the episode and sets up the entire main conflict, where basically Lancer's like, if you do well on this test, you'll be successful like Jazz. If you do poorly, you'll end up in a dead-end job at somewhere like the Nasty Burger, which is the fast food place. And here they set up this thing about the Nasty Burger secret sauce that if it's not maintained properly, it'll literally explode. I think the fast food worker guy even has a line about how his life is basically over since he works in this dead-end job.
Who am I kidding? My life is over.
Which is good foreshadowing for later. But I want to talk about the CAT test because it's very confusing. So they call it a career aptitude test, which if you've ever taken one of those, it's basically just a survey that determines types of careers you might be good at or might enjoy doing. But the way they talk about it in this episode is that either you score high and you pass, or you score low and you fail, which is not what a career aptitude test is. It seems like what they might be describing is more similar to an SAT, a standardized test of some kind that can impact the types of jobs you can get in the future.
One last shot at the perfect score.
I have an idea.
You want to steal the answers to the test.
But they refer to it as a career aptitude test. There's also a specific answer sheet, and there's right and wrong answers. So I don't know. It's very confusing how they explain what the test is, which is kind of the whole conceit of the episode. It doesn't really matter. It's just a metaphor for the choices that you make affecting your future, and the themes of the episode about how the future is not written in stone. It's based on the choices that you make. It's just an easy parallel between Danny's personal life, having this big test in school that is said to determine his future, and this time travel plot that literally will determine his future. So that just kind of parallels nicely, and the actual logistics of it don't really make any sense, but if you don't think about it too hard, it's a really fun episode. Okay, let me try to figure out the time travel element of this episode, because it's kind of confusing, as all time travel stories are. But essentially, the chain of events that lead to Danny becoming the evil Danny that the heroes are trying to prevent is that at some point in the evil Danny's timeline, Danny cheats on the test, which leads Lancer to call his family and have a meeting with them about Danny cheating at the Nasty Burger, which is not being maintained, and so the secret sauce explodes, which kills Danny's entire family and Tucker and Sam and Lancer as well. And then, due to his entire family and friends fucking exploding, Danny becomes so depressed that he goes to Vlad for help and asks Vlad to rip the humanity out of him so he can no longer feel sad about his entire family exploding, which Vlad does, and then Danny's ghost self rips out Vlad's ghost part of him and fuses with that, becomes even more evil, and then murders his own human side and continues to grow evil until he has basically taken over the entire world. And some of the Ghost Zone, it would seem, because all the ghosts are fucking scared of them. We get to see fun future versions of the ghosts throughout this episode. There's like Lunchbox, who's the daughter of the box ghost and the lunch lady, which is interesting because it implies that ghosts can have kids somehow. We get a version of Skulker that's combined with Technus, which is kind of fun. They even bring back the purple-backed gorilla joke from the first episode with Skulker, so that's a nice little callback. And then we see some future versions of like the Box Ghost and Ember and Johnny 13 and some of the other ghosts from the series. Anyway, so the whole Danny becoming evil plot that Danny and his friends are trying to prevent is made more complicated because the events in the way they transpire in this episode only really occur that way because people are influencing these events through time. First being Clockwork, he actually subtly gives Danny the test answers so that he can have the opportunity to cheat, and then manipulates Lunchbox to fight Danny at the Nasty Burger, which is why the secret sauce is not being maintained and why it will explode later on in the episode. Then later, the evil Danny starts manipulating the events so that they occur the way that I guess he remembers them occurring, where Danny cheats on the test and then his family explodes. So the evil Danny takes regular Danny's place and cheats on the test so that those events will transpire. So it's confusing because it's like, is it a time loop or is it like a separate timeline thing? Because at the end of the episode, Danny does make the good choice of not cheating on the test, therefore preventing his family from exploding. But the evil Danny doesn't go away because Danny traps him in his thermos and then Clockwork kind of takes him away, and now he exists outside of time, whatever that means, and they suggest that he'll come back at some point in the series, and then he never does. Because the show only had one more season, and then it got canceled. So, hooray. What's confusing is this a time loop, or is it like an alternate timeline situation, because there's time travel involved now, the timeline has been split? And I'm not entirely sure, but I think the only way that I can explain this episode is that I believe it's supposed to be that once Clockwork gets involved, we're now seeing an alternate timeline from the timeline that the evil Danny is from. But the evil Danny thinks that it's a time loop, so that's why he's trying to manipulate events as to how they happened the first time for him, which I think is that at some point that we just don't see, Danny decides to cheat all on his own without things being manipulated, which leads to a similar but slightly different chain of events that lead to his family exploding and him turning evil. And then Clockwork gets involved and changes the timeline, but Dark Danny thinks it's a time loop, and so he tries to redirect the timeline so that events happen the same way he remembers. I don't know exactly. Again, it's probably best if you just don't think about it too much. But unfortunately, I've watched this show many times, and so now these are the things that I think about. But whatever, it doesn't really matter. It's just the concept that's fun and cool, and thematically all works, where Lancer says that this career aptitude test will determine your future, and then Danny deciding to cheat on it literally changes his future drastically. Of course, Danny, by the end of the episode, Clockwork has manipulated events that they work out exactly as planned, and Danny decides not to cheat. But it is still his choice. And that's, I think, what makes the episode work, is that although the time travel stuff is very convoluted, at the end of the day, Danny has a moment where he gets to choose whether to do the right thing or the wrong thing, and he chooses to do the right thing, which shows that he's growing as a character and as a person, and is learned the lesson, and it works thematically, and the whole your destiny is what you make it kind of thing. Some other cool things about this episode. Jazz has a subplot, of course, where she's trying to prevent Danny from cheating. They do another moment with like a Fenton ghost gadget invention at the start of the episode that comes back later on. This time it's the boomerang, which can lock onto a ghost signature. Jazz later on uses it to send Danny a note through the ghost portal when he's trapped in the future, and the boomerang just travels around the ghost zone for 10 years until eventually it finds him in the future. This is also significant because it leads to Danny figuring out that Jazz knows his secret, and so at the end of the episode we get another shift in status quo where now Danny knows that Jazz knows that he's a ghost, and so she becomes a little more involved in his life, and the main status quo of the series shifts a little bit once again. We also get a new ghost power, first introduced at the start of the episode with the evil Danny, this ghostly whale. It's like a Black Canary sonic scream attack thing, but ghost themed. And then Danny, throughout the episode, learns how to do it. So again, I like throughout the series that Danny becomes stronger and better at his abilities. There's some other fun details in this episode. The Fright Knight has a very brief appearance early on, and he has this like D20 attack, which I think is fun. Danny and Tucker and Sam have this like brief kind of fight with Clockwork. When Clockwork's using his like time abilities, the score will change based on what he's doing. So if he like reverses time, the score will play in reverse.
Time out.
Little details like that I think are fun, and it's done, and they did it before Tenet, so suck on that, Nolan. Several of the Fenton gadgets make a reappearance: the Fenton peeler, the ghost gauntlets, and the specter deflector. Little nice attention to detail and continuity, which I like. Also, Dark Danny has a moment where he says, "I'm inevitable," in a time travel story where he's the big bad.
But me, my future, I'm inevitable.
So suck on that, Avengers. One of the strongest episodes of the series. It's consistently well written throughout, and all the characters get interesting and unique things to do. It has an obvious but strong and consistent theme throughout. It's extremely dark. I think the darkest episode of the series. For many fans, this is the peak of the show. It's almost exactly in the middle. We're about halfway through the second of 3 seasons, and it doesn't really ever get better than this episode. But yeah, a really fun and strong episode with dark themes and interesting ideas, cool world building, set up for a extremely interesting villain that never comes back. But that's not a negative of this episode. It's just like a cool dark future episode, and it works really well. And it has something to say about the characters. As long as you don't think too hard about the logistics of the time travel or what the hell the CAT is in this universe, it makes for a really fun episode and a really good time. And the video game is not bad either. So that's about it. We will see you next time in the future. We recently just hit 300 subscribers, which I know doesn't sound like a whole lot in the grand scheme of things, but it means a lot to me. You might have noticed, but I don't make any money off of these videos, so I'm doing them just purely for fun, just because I like and enjoy making these videos. So the fact that some other people seem to enjoy the videos as well is really exciting and means a lot to me, and just just makes me feel good. So I really hope that you enjoy the videos. Thank you for subscribing and for sticking around, because we got some more stuff coming soon. So yeah, thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing.